hello, James. I think, we might as well start with what we're looking at the moment here. Would you like to just give us a sense of what the viewers have got in front of them?
So this is a box of makeup, which therefore must have come from our show Made Up, which was about a makeup artist and her relationship with her client. So, and then beyond that, actually what we're seeing is a series of stills that were projected on our 25th anniversary party.
Right, so I can see Graham here, so perhaps it would be helpful if you just gave us a little bit of background and how Graham fits into the picture.
So yeah, Graham and I founded Stan's Cafe in 1991, I'd just graduated from Lancaster University. He'd left 3 years before. He'd been in a company called Glory What Glory. When they split up, we got together and we established ourselves in Birmingham. And I've been directing and writing stuff as Stan's Cafe ever since, and Graham's done a vast range of other exciting stuff and still works with us, as you can see. And we work with a range of associate artists, as well as having a full-time staff of 4 of us. So that's Jake and Krista Grunier, who are 2 of our associate artists who we work with regularly. We like to work with a core group of people who we return to regularly, and then have sort of fresh blood and talent injected into that.
There's some beautiful images there of Twilight of the Freaking Gods, but I just wondered, could you just explain the thinking behind going to Birmingham in the early 90s?
Yeah, so lots of people were going to Manchester from Lancaster, obviously, and London was a great draw, but we were just looking for a big city which didn't have very many experimental theatre companies in it, so that we could corner the market in crazy stuff. And Birmingham was a cheap, big city in the centre of the country. Graham was from there, so he knew lots of people, so it seemed like a good place to establish.
Well, it might be worth just talking about that image for a second.
So that is from a show called Finger Trigger Bullet Gun. Graham's in that as well. You can see him with a spiky helmet. And that was about the start of the First World War, so it was coinciding with the 100th anniversary of that. And those dominoes were, I suppose, a metaphoric device which formed a map of Europe at the time. And obviously there's this increasing tension as the safety gaps get filled in the dominoes, all ready for the assassination of the Archduke, at which point all the dominoes start to fall. And I think that's an example of how we're really interested in trying to find formal devices within the shows which speak to the content of the shows. Or sometimes, yes, you come across a formal device and then you hunt around for the content that you want to put into there.
Yeah.
So actually, this Roger Penrose is kind of part of that. It's a show we made way back in 94, I think it was, about artificial intelligence, really. And so it's that and Blade Runner and so on, about human identity and what makes you who you are.
That's the first image of all the people in all the world, so maybe it's worth just chatting about that for a second, if you wish to.
Well, I suppose being a theatre company and an independent theatre company, we take that as a licence to pursue ideas we're interested in whatever direction they take us, really. And sometimes that results in a theatre show. Usually it results in a theatre show, but sometimes it doesn't. And for that piece in particular, we'd been doing lots of international touring and started to get a bit of an agoraphobia about the size of the world and the number of people that we share the planet with, and we're searching for a way to understand that and reflect on it. And so grains of rice representing individuals, allowing us to talk about population statistics, came up as an idea. And a sort of slightly throwaway idea turns into whatever that is now, 14, 15 years of touring.
Yeah. As the people watching this might know, you and I were fortunate enough to write Devising Theatre with Stan's Cafe. available through all good booksellers. But one of the first chapters we wrote about was ideas, and so it's just interesting when you think about the things that you've already talked about. It might be interesting for the people watching this just to have a sense of the eclectic nature of where your ideas come from. Do they appear out of the blue, or do you go mining for them? I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about your ideas process.
Yeah, it's. I like to characterise it as stars in the sky, really. So you have this. Oh, that would be a great idea, staging idea. That's an interesting question, or that's an atmosphere it would be really nice to have in the show. Or why don't we ever collaborate with a makeup artist? And these questions and ideas sit there in the sky in a way, and then eventually you start to recognise clusters of these ideas, constellations, and you start to be able to pull them together to make a show. So most recently we made a show called The Capital, which linked up a staging idea I'd had for years about using twin parallel travelators on stage, and then we were talking to people at the economics department of Warwick University, and they were starting to talk about equality being one of the big challenges in the world, and suddenly the travelators suddenly felt like a very good way of talking about inequality, and so a show sort of springs out of these two quite separate things.
Does that mean then that because you have quite an eclectic way of ideas being generated and you're certainly not reliant on existing texts, does this mean that your research your rehearsal methodologies are also very eclectic, or do you tend to kind of find your way into a show with similar methods, or is it a very broad church of rehearsal?
I think clearly there are lots of you have approaches that have worked in the past that you will turn to again, but frustratingly often they don't work because it's a different thing, so you have to find new ways. So some might be very improvisational based, and others might just be sitting and talking about addressing problems and how you find solutions with very little improvisation. So yes, very very specific for the different challenges of the different projects, really.
So in terms of the kind of performance style of Stanscath work, I've seen obviously a lot of the shows, and perhaps people watching this may have seen the style of that. There's a certain performance quality to what you do. Perhaps I wonder if you want to talk about that a little bit, about the performance quality, the movement quality, the textual quality of how your performers work. Would you refer to them as actors? Is that a word you're?
Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, I think actors, they do jobs on the stage, I suppose. And very sort of challenging. So this piece we've got here, Be Proud of Me, was written mostly using text from tourist phrase books. So we imposed a formal constraint on ourselves that the text should come exclusively from tourist phrase books, which gave a real tension between the language that the performers were able to use and the sense they wanted to convey. And so the performers, as well as being devisers, therefore having an ownership in that way, rarely play characters in a conventional sense. They're sort of figures on stage, and sometimes they're figures who in turn play other figures, so their identities are very fluid. Sometimes they play a sort of pictorial role on stage, so it's very much about how they are seen, and create narrative in that way. But you'd probably be better off talking to them about it. I have no idea what they do, really. I'm not one of those directors who gets stuck into the... One
of the phrases we used in the book was doing what is necessary, isn't it? So I think one of the kind of aspects that is brought to mind with Stanscath is bringing things down to what is essential without peripherality. And I'm not sure if I just made up a word there, but things that are peripheral. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's no showing off, great acting,
it's not
flourishes.
Bravura in that sense. It's keeping what is.
And sort of, in some ways, kind of task-based. but the task might be the delivery of the text. Hey, we've got a bit
Oh
of
yes, this is
action.
great. Yeah, go on, James. Tell us about this.
So this is from our show, The Just Price of Flowers, which is very rarely seen because it's got a cast of, 10 or something.
Is it really?
But yes, it was about the financial crisis, and it was Howard Brecht addressed the 2008 crash, and we decided he would talk about the tulip mania phenomena from the Netherlands, and so that's the one of the scenes from that show. Bernadette eating a cake as fast as she could. In contrast to all the other scenes are sort of very witty and text-based. Mostly dialogues. So it's a very formal arrangement of which characters speak to which other characters. So you see someone being persuaded to invest in tulip bulbs and getting carried away with that.
I'm not sure if I recognise that immediately.
No, that was a one-off. Birmingham hosted the IETM conference, and we thought it would be fun to supply a courtesy car. So Craig's the courtesy car driver,
right, I didn't know that.
But he's suffering terrible personal trauma at the time. So so if you choose to take the courtesy car, you find yourself involved in his personal life and going via his ex-partner's house, and
I like that idea.
Not massively efficient. It's an old postcard from a really old show.
Yeah. These images are scrolling in a wonderfully Stanscath way, aren't they? In a nice.
They're a little bit art house, aren't they? A bit Tarkovsky or
Oh, there. Go on. One of the regular.
That's Gerard
contributors.
Yeah, performing in The Cleansing of Constance Brown. This is a show, one of our silent shows. So there's music and the performers speak on stage, but the audience can't hear them.
Yeah.
So it's purely conveyed by images, and the stage for that show is 2 metres wide and 14 metres deep, and with 7 doors on each side of the corridor. It's sort of corridor of power, really, riffing off questions about sort of Greek tragedy, I suppose, where the big action happens off stage, and how much can the audience learn about what's happening off stage by what they see on stage.
Yeah.
And it sort of jumps about through time and space, and that was Gerard having performed a somewhat failed exorcism. And then this show...
Yes, this leads us nicely to this one.
Yeah, so that was a very strongly framed show, and The Cardinals is also strongly framed, so you can see Graham as Goliath there, but just in the corner, on the left-hand side of the image, you can see Rochi, who performs as stage manager in that show. The audience get to see what's outside that little puppet theatre stage, and get to see, I suppose, the composition and editorial process of what the supposed audience are seeing in that narrow stage. So that sort of strength of framing is something that's come back in a strand of work a number of times. Actually, the Capitol with its travelators is the latest incarnation or edition, I suppose, of that series of shows. And you can see Rochi there in another guise in a collaboration we did with Birmingham Contemporary Music Group, where they called us in a number of times to stage shows for their young people. And here's back to The Just Price of Flowers with the young husband being tempted by the floristienne to invest. You can see his rough starts very small, but by the end it's huge. And this is
one of your kind of long-term musings, isn't it? Or one of your personas that has manifested itself many times.
This is our Associate Director, Craig, as one of the 2 commentators. So this is the very first time we met the commentators. They commented on a 24-hour Scalextrics race.
I'll come back to this in a minute.
And subsequently they've commentated on all sorts of things: the World Gurning Championships, musical festivals, the opening of the Library of Birmingham, the view from a window of a hotel looking out on a sort of nightclub street, all webcast. So sort of CCTV for the radio, or test match special for something that isn't cricket.
One of the things that's been scrolling through is things about the city and schools. So, I mean, in the broader sense, the portfolio of what you do. Here's an image now. There's a lot of work related to young people as well. So I wondered if you wanted just to talk about that a little
Yeah,
bit. We've seen images of a variety of projects.
Well, we just really love collaborating with people, whether it's Birmingham Contemporary
Yeah.
Music Group
Collaboration, that's
or the young people. So we have currently three partner schools in Birmingham, 2 secondary, 1 primary, and we work very closely with them on how our what we do can help them do what they do. So sometimes it's making theatre shows with them. So that was The Tempest, which we staged with all of Year 8, twin productions, so 2 casts of 110. It doesn't have to be theatre at all.
No.
Anything that helps those schools improve along their plan. We've got enough associate artists to bring in whoever we want to help.
While this is scrolling along, it'd be worth talking about this because this is a good example of Stanscath taking on massive challenges, enjoying biting off
Yes,
a big old chunk.
So when we were in Belgrade with It's Your Film, the producer of that festival said Stanscath's the only company he could imagine adapting his favourite book for the stage, and his favourite book is The Anatomy of Melancholy, which is a 1,500-page, 400-year-old encyclopedia, a sort of self-help book about melancholy. And so 10 years after he threw down the challenge, this is our solution to the problem. This is us staging that show. And so, yes, we invited Nenad Prokic to this show, and he is, as well as a festival director then, he's also a very esteemed playwright in his home country. And we commissioned from him the text that became that Finger Trigger Bullet Gun show with the dominoes. So it all loops round.
Yeah, collaborations work in lots of different ways, don't they, as well?
So, yeah, this is a really good fun. It was a very formally structured book, so you can see in the staging we're attempting to replicate that structure. So this is Home of the Wrigley. This is coming back, actually. This is going to be back out on tour next year. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
So this was prompted by the closure of the Longbridge car plant. So you can see Craig holding a light up with Bernadette and Amanda in front.
Yeah.
And so the power for that show is all generated by the performers, because it's sort of set in this post-oil kind of post-car world, reflecting on the closure of the Longbridge car plant. But now more and more car plants are closing down in Britain, so
it has
feels
doesn't it?
time to bring it back. Yes, there's sort of, I was thinking actually there's quite connections between the Capitol, which is like looking out of the window of a bus as you drive through a city, and you see these fragments of stories, and Home of the Wrigglers very much the same, but with text, where you just see, or you hear fragments of stories. You sort of zip by these stories and many figures who you have a momentary emotional connection with, and then they're off, gone again. I think it's one of our Scalextric figures from the 24-hour race, one of the fans.
So what's on the cards at the moment? How does the future look for Stanscath then? Are there what irons are in fires and all the cliches I can think of?
Well, we're trying
Where are things heading?
We're trying to be very ambitious. So we've got a big walk-in brain installation that we hope to manage to get going by the end of 2019, if not early 2020.
A walk-in brain installation.
Yeah. So that should be good.
I like the way you say that, like that's self-explanatory.
Yeah. Well, it's because we don't quite know how it works yet. And don't tell the people we're trying to get the money off that we don't quite know how it works yet.
We'll put a password on this.
We've got a ludicrously ambitious pitch in for the Coventry City of Culture.
Oh, indeed, yes.
Which probably won't happen, but would be extraordinary if it did. Right. And we've got a spin-off idea from that, where if that doesn't happen, then we will be making a show about heart transplants, which works a little bit, that Twilight of the Freaking Gods that we saw very early on. That was a version of Gotterdammerung, which takes its timings, its formal structure, I suppose, from the original, a recording of Gotterdammerung, and so sort of behind that performance is got jamming. So in the same way, behind the heart transplant performance is an actual heart transplant. So the script comes from what is said in an actual, we record a series of heart transplants and find one that we like. And we use the sounds of the studio as that. So yes, the operating theatre ghosts the theatre, and then we're sort of, the audience are privileged to be in this extraordinary operation, and then we reflect on the place of the heart, I suppose, in culture and mythology and so on.
Fascinating.
I've
no idea how much time we've got left on this, but it just reminds me to ask you about text, because that just reminds me again how diverse the texts are that you draw upon. Really, I'm just interested to know what texts, how texts come about.
Yeah, well, I love writing, so I really, I would sort of write all of them if all of them needed writing, but they don't all need writing because some of them don't have any words, and some of them, the text comes from improvisation, so sometimes it's just me sort of tidying up or embellishing or structuring improvised text. It's very rare. The Just Price of Flowers is one of the very few times where I've sat down and written it. Sometimes texts are found or collaged, and sometimes, so for example, Home with the Wriggler, there's the Haynes manual on how to change spark plugs, and that sort of gets rewritten as how to mend a broken heart or something like that. So it's sort of how to do something in the real world. I think this might be the last image. There we go. Possibly.
Is it about to dissolve?
Yeah, it's one of our kids' projects actually, with the Year 6 doing a huge banquet to celebrate the end of their SATs.